Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Good to go. Good luck.
Great, thank you.
Chair Brown, it's 1 o'clock and we do have a quorum if you'd like to begin.
Great. Thank you, Kay. Good afternoon, members of the Active Transportation Committee. This meeting is now called to order. Please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. We will now begin by the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin a roll call in order of agency. Kelsey Shatnick. Elaine Mariel. Tiffany Halperin. Anissa Gerard.
Here.
Thank you. Sasha Pachito. Earl Ratledge.
Here.
Thank you. Jose Macias.
Here.
Allison Feliz.
Here.
Justin Weldy.
Present.
Stephanie Bubenheim.
Here.
Patrick Sage. Wayne Smith.
Here.
John Froke. Proxy for Daniel Loftus. Reed Kempton.
Here.
Garrett Topham.
Here.
Amy Rebinar.
Here.
John Beltrain.
Here.
Tara Harmon.
Present.
Stephen Esther. Susan Conclu.
Here.
Thank you. Jonathan Fuchs.
Here.
Chase Wallman.
Here.
Marty Zeich.
Present.
Thank you. Grant Anderson.
Here.
And Chair Mariel Brown.
Here.
Thank you, Chair. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Kay. Our next item is call to audience. MAG provides the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda just for discussion and not for action. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online comments for the call to the audience?
Thank you, Chair, members of the Active Transportation Committee. We have received 6 online written comments, and they have been provided to members in advance of the meeting for your consideration.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the MAG staff report. This item is on the agenda for information and will be presented by Ted Brown, Transportation Planning and Performance Manager.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to welcome our newest member to the Active Transportation Committee. We have Wayne Smith, the Parks and Rec Right-of-Way Superintendent, representing the City of Goodyear. Welcome, Wayne. I'd also like to remind the committee that preparations are underway for our annual joint meeting with MAG's Transit Committee. We're planning an in-person meeting on June 3rd, and I hope to see you there. I'd also like to inform the committee about an upcoming event hosted by ASU. It's titled the Bicycling in Tempe, a Multimedia and Interactive Experience. The experience is designed to share the state of bicycling in Tempe using interactive exhibits to serve as the background for a discussion about next steps for bicycling infrastructure. The event is being held on April 29th from 3 to 4:30 and then again at 5 to 6:30 in the auditorium at the Walton Center for Planetary Health. You can get in touch with Kate Bork for more information on that event. Finally, I just wanted to mention a couple of MAG media posts related to active transportation in April. Special thanks to the Coalition of Arizona Cyclists for posting information about the level of traffic stress presentation for today. And thank you to Valley Metro, who shared MAG's post and message on the active transportation feedback map for Bike Month. Thank you, Chair. That completes my report.
Thank you, Ted. All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. Do any members of the committee have questions? All right, hearing none, prior to approval of the meeting minutes, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment. Staff, have we received any online written comments for this item?
Thank you, Chair and members of the Active Transportation Committee. We did not receive any comments related to this agenda item.
All right, thank you, Kay. Is there a motion to approve agenda item number 4?
I so move. Anderson.
All right, thank you, member.
Justin Weldy.
All right, we have a motion from member Anderson and a second from member Weldy. We will have those participating in the meeting take part in a voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who goes on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, members, please leave your cameras on. And staff, can you take a roll call of the members who did not turn on their camera, please?
Thank you, Chair. Anissa Gerard, how do you vote?
Aye. Sorry, I can't get my camera on for some reason.
That's okay, thank you. Jonathan Fuchs, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Thank you. Elaine Mariel,
Abstain.
thank you. Chase Wallman,
Aye.
thank you. Earl Rutledge,
Aye.
Garrett Topham,
Aye.
thank you. And I believe I called everyone, but please, if there's anyone I missed. Thank you, Chair. The motion passes.
All right, thank
This
you,
is
Kay.
Susan Conclu. I'm an aye. Sorry.
Thank you, Susan.
Great. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Kay. Next item on the agenda is item number 5. And this item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Noah Guild, MAG Transportation Planning. Intern. Over to you, Noah.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Members of the Active Transportation Committee, I am pleased to be here to present to you all today. I'm going to be covering a subject some of you might be familiar with, called level of traffic stress. Just giving a brief introduction into what it is and then talking about a little bit of work going on here at MAG related to it. Next slide, please. So we'll just start out with some quick definitions. Level of traffic stress, or LTS, can be defined as a stress tolerance-based classification approach for quantifying the amount of discomfort people feel when walking or cycling. It essentially involves evaluating bikeways against a series of stress factors and then assigning a score from 1 to 4. It builds off of the Geller traffic stress frameworks for rider types. This essentially organizes the population into 4 types of riders based on willingness. On one end, you have no way, no how riders. These are people who are essentially not interested in riding a bicycle. And then on the other end, you have strong and fearless riders. These are people willing to ride in almost any traffic conditions. And I would like to point out that the majority of the population actually falls in that second from top category of interested but concerned. These are people open to riding on separated paths and calm streets, essentially low stress environments. Next slide, please. So similarly, level of traffic stress splits bikeways up into 4 different categories or ratings. These range from very low stress to high stress, with higher numbers indicating higher levels of stress. Up top, you can see LTS1 bikeways are described as being comfortable for all ages and abilities, including children. These feature little to no intermingling with vehicle traffic. Below that, you have LTS2 bikeways. These are somewhat more stressful, but still comfortable for the majority of adult riders, and generally feature lower traffic speeds and volumes, and some occasional conflicts with vehicles. And in this context, vehicle conflicts can be defined as any point where a vehicle and a cyclist might cross paths. So for example, crossings, turns, and places where car doors might open up in front of a cyclist. Below that, you have LTS3 bikeways. These are somewhat more stressful and only comfortable for a small subset of riders, about 10%. These are characterized by moderate traffic speeds and volumes, often on multi-lane roads with limited separation between cyclists and vehicles. And then finally, at the bottom, you have LTS4 bikeways. These are the highest stress bikeways, generally only suitable for a small subset of the population. These generally feature shared and or minimally separated facilities on multi-lane roads of higher speeds and volumes. Next slide, please. So here you can see some examples of those different categories. On the left, you can see an LTS1 bikeway, which consists of a quiet residential street, the type of place you might see children playing. To the right of that, you can see an LTS2 bikeway, consisting of a parking buffered bike lane, providing some moderate separation between cyclists and vehicles. But as you can see, there's a crossing right there, which indicates cyclists might still need to be vigilant. On the right to that, you can see an LTS3 bikeway consisting of an unprotected bike lane. In this particular case, it's blocked by a car door, which would force cyclists out into the roadway. And then finally, on the right, you can see an LTS4 bikeway, which consists of a 4-lane road with a sharrow indicating cyclists would have to share the roadway with vehicles. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering how this applies to MAG. Well, level of traffic stress can be helpful as it establishes a standardized quantitative framework for assessing bikeways to complement existing qualitative frameworks. It can be used to create maps like the one shown on the right for the city of Toronto, and is particularly helpful in identifying critical gaps in the existing bike network. So for example, a high stress segment on a route that is otherwise low stress. It's also helpful as it can inform future funding decisions and optimize spending, including through programs such as MAG's own competitive project call allocations. Next slide, please. So MAG is currently in the process of reviewing 5 peer agencies for best practices related to level of traffic stress. These include the City of Boston, the Mineta Transportation Institute in San Jose, California, Montgomery County, Maryland, Arizona's own PAG, and then Washington State Department of Transportation. Staff are considering which stress factors are used most commonly within these agencies, and then which ones data is actually available for, as well as how these agencies split up or categorize different types of bikeways, and then finally looking at scoring methodologies. Next slide, please. So here you can see we've kind of mapped out the different stress factors used by these different agencies and organized them into 3 different categories based on commonality. At the top, you can see universal factors are ones applied by all the agencies. These include posted speed, bikeway type, which we'll talk a bit more about on the next slide, and then roadway intensity, which can be measured either through the number of vehicle lanes on the roadway or the traffic volume. Below that, you can see common factors are ones used by 2 or more agencies. These include things like street parking, whether bikeways are in residential or non-residential areas, facility widths, and then curbside conflicts. And I would like to point out that street parking in this particular context refers to parking as more of a source of conflict than as a buffer between cyclists and vehicles. So for example, a parking lane between cyclists and the sidewalk. And then below that, you can see additional factors are those used by just one agency. These include route directness, freight traffic, and then in the context of Montgomery County, which is predominantly rural, the presence of a center line in the roadway. Next slide, please. So just to talk a bit about those different bikeway classifications, all agencies differentiated their bikeways based on two factors. The first being whether a dedicated bike facility was actually present, for example, a bike lane. And then the second being whether that bike facility is physically protected. So using those two factors, you can get three different types of bikeways. Mixed traffic are facilities where are roadways where cyclists are expected to share the roadway with vehicles. These do not feature dedicated bike facilities. You also have unprotected bikeways and then protected bikeways. Slide, please. So just to go over some current peer review findings, I won't go into the specifics of each agency framework. Many of them use a similar process for assigning base LTS values using a function of posted speed and then roadway intensity. So I'll just talk about a couple of the unique qualities from each of these agencies. We'll start with City of Boston. As I said, Boston uses a similar process for assigning base LTS scores, but they also apply a conflict factors filter, which can increase LTS scores by 1. These factors include things like high intensity land uses, key bus routes, and then curbside pickup zones, which includes schools. Moving on. The Mineta Transportation Institute was unique as they automatically assign physically separated bikeways an LTS score of 1. They do this regardless of the posted speed or the number of lanes. Washington State Department of Transportation is unique in that it assigns bike lanes reduced LTS scores if they are classified as wide. And in their context, that means 7 feet wide or greater, including both the bike lane and the buffer. Next slide, please. Montgomery County was particularly interesting as they actually add 3 additional LTS categories. So they use 7 ratings instead of 4. These additional ones include LTS 0, which applies to bikeways with an independent right-of-way, essentially off the main roadway. One example of such facilities in our local context would be Arizona's canal trail system. LTS 2.5 serves as a sort of intermediary between LTS 2 and 3 to bridge the gap between those two. And then LTS 5 applies to routes where biking is virtually non-existent. So for example, a rural road with only a wide shoulder. And then finally, one unique aspect of PAG's framework is that it assigns all roadways over 45 miles an hour an LTS of 4. They do this in recognition of the inherent incompatibility between high vehicle speeds and cyclist comfort. Next slide, please. So moving along to next steps, over the next month, MAG staff will work to review these agencies for best practices related to level of traffic stress. This will inform the creation of an in-house traffic stress scoring framework, which will channel into a GIS-based LTS evaluation tool. Staff will return during the May 2024 Active Transportation Committee meeting with updates. And then I'll just sort of end things with a few discussion points. Did anything in particular catch your attention? And then was there anything you liked or disliked about these agency frameworks? And next slide. And with that, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee, I will conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. Thank you. And I can see one.
Member Kempton.
Hi. We've been using level of traffic stress actually in the county's 1999 bicycle plan, we evaluated all of our roadways using level of traffic stress, done by Alex Sorton. When we did our last active transportation plan, we also added in a stress level of 5 for those rural roads with unpaved shoulders. Otherwise, you can't show any improvement. So what's the point in putting a shoulder on a road if there's no improvement? And anybody who's ridden on those roads knows that having a paved shoulder is huge in getting the bikes out of the way of the cars, and in your level of stress, it goes way down. So I would encourage, if MAG is going to redo this, to look at that as well. I would also like to see this compared with the bicycle level of service that was done for the entire MAG region in one of the earlier plans, to see if they're similar or if things have improved.
Thank you for that comment, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. Certainly always happy to get additional ideas and feedback. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Anderson, I have a question. Chair say okay? I'll ask it.
All right. Yes. Member Anderson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any differentiation between a manual power and electric? Because it seems like there's more and more electrics, and they create different issues on pathways and roadways and everything else. And as of now, I think they're still able to use the bike paths because some of them are restricted in speed to 12 to 15 miles an hour, which a bicyclist can go very easily. So has that been thought of in this level of stress? Because they make pedal power people stressed because of the way that they can go around them and maneuver and outflank them pretty quickly.
Thank you for that question, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. That's certainly a great point. Off the top of my head, I don't know if any of these 5 frameworks have factored that in. I know some of them were created before those electric forms of transportation really gained popularity. But we're certainly happy to look into that and get back to you on it.
Of course, that does include, like you mentioned, all the other forms of electric things, these electric scooters, all the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Topham, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, thank you, Chair, Committee. This is Garrett Topham from City of Mesa, and speaking as someone who rides regularly and in all forms of traffic, I want to point out, and I'm sure there's others that would agree with me, that just because we ride everywhere doesn't mean we do it without stress. But that stress doesn't often come from the amount of side shoulder or bike lane or buffer up to protection. That stress comes from crossing driveways, minor intersections, major intersections, and especially those with right-hand turn pockets. The actual bike lane, bike facility often is only a small piece of the level of stress of riding on a roadway. And I didn't see through those other agencies much discussion about how many breaks there would be in this protected facility. I can tell you that if I'm in a rural area or even a residential area without a lot of driveways, I need almost no shoulder at all. And so it's just something I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. I know some of the agencies we're exploring do have separate levels of traffic stress for intersections specifically. And as far as I know, that is something we would like to look into at the regional level. I think the idea is that we are starting with a segment-based approach, and then at some point we can extend that into factoring in intersections. But that's definitely a great point. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And Member Ratledge, you have your
Yeah,
hand
this is
raised.
Earl Ratledge with Coalition Arizona Bicyclists. I had two questions. The first one was just asked by Garrett, and that is, how does cross traffic or changing directions fit into this, intersections? The other question I guess I have is, what's the ultimate goal of this work? Is it to have a tool that every member agency can use to then score their streets, or is MAG thinking they would add something to their mapping toolbox that would include this information? So I'm just interested in where do you see this in the future?
Great. Thank you for that question, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. Let me see. I'm not sure if I heard your first question correct. I just want to clarify, were you talking about those intersection approaches? I know you mentioned changing directions. Would you mind clarifying that just real quick?
Right. So you have intersections where you have to interact with cross traffic or other vehicles making a change. You also have situations where you need to make a left turn and you need to cross several lanes of traffic, or maybe get into a left turn lane. So I'm just wondering if those will also have some consideration here.
I see. Yeah, so at the moment, I think we are fairly early on in this process and still have to discuss the exact scoring methodology we would like to use. So I don't have an exact answer for that at the moment, but that's certainly something we are going to explore and are interested in hearing feedback on from our member agencies. For your second question, yes, I think the idea long-term is to create a mapping tool available to the public so that they can explore different routes around the valley for use by member agencies. And then we would also like to incorporate this into potentially into our competitive calls for projects as well. But that would involve a longer process. So I'm not sure what the timeline would be on that. I don't know if that answers your questions.
It does. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Member Topham.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. That just brought up something to me when I was thinking about for the mapping. Do you know, my background's in GIS, so the way you would do routing is having a scoring attribute. And I was curious if you know if, like a Google routing, when you select bicycle, I would assume it uses some sort of level of stress that it's come up with in order to determine that routing. And maybe this is more just a comment that that would be great if we could somehow develop that into our MAG mapping to know that if I want to go from destination from a point to another point, let's say home to destination, that it would be able to run along these segments, and it may not be the most direct route, but it would be the less stressful route. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. I know that is something other agencies have also thought of and factored in. I think it's WashDOT who incorporates a route directness factor into their scoring, looking at things like, understanding that maybe the shortest route is not going to be the best one. I'm not sure exactly how Google Maps factors that in to their mapping tools. Ted Brown might be able to speak to that better than I can, but that's certainly a great point. Thank you.
And Member Weldy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we should take into consideration, or at least have a discussion about the environmental factors, including but not limited to weather, and how that will be equated into the final report or the recommendations when we're talking about implementing changes, especially if they're costly and knowing the struggle that several agencies have for funding.
Thank you for that comment, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. That's a great point. I think it applies particularly well to our local context. So we'll certainly factor that in.
Thank you. And I have a few questions as well. So I was going to ask about how you're incorporating intersection data, and just want to encourage you to look at a great work that the Mineta Transportation Institute did. Was they also used by actually doing that LTS for intersections as well, they were able to create that connection map and kind of map out what's the low stress network, and then be able to pinpoint where small changes or improvements on one segment or a few intersections could really connect their low stress network. And I would encourage you to look at seeing if MAG could do something like that, because having that intersection data will really help to make all of the map more useful. But I am excited for any form of LTS data being available to member agencies and also to active transportation users in the region. So it's great news. I also wanted to ask if you would be looking at the updates to LTS methodology that Peter Firth has published and shared on his website. He was one of the main authors of the Mineta of the initial Mineta report, and he has over the years offered a few updates on his website. So if you are, I was just wondering if you're looking at it.
Thank you, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. That is very helpful. The name Peter Firth does ring a bell. I can't say off the top of my head how we factored that in so far, but that's certainly something that we can look into and integrate into our eventual scoring methodology.
All right, thank you. And I would be happy to share that with you. It's what I often refer to when I'm looking at this for my own work. And then I also was curious about the future plans for using this in terms of evaluation. LTS by 3, then are like 3 levels or 2 levels, there will be additional points, or is it more like you just need to reach LTS 1 or LTS 2, or do you have any sense of where that's going?
At the moment, I don't have specific information on that. I know that's something that we would probably start to work out once we have a clear methodology established and a scoring tool created. Then we can tweak that and talk about changing our weighting processes and things like that. So that is definitely something that we are going to be talking about, I think, in the weeks and months to come.
All right, thank you. And I also just wanted to comment that I really LTS 5, these super stressful streets. I've always thought that one of the limitations of Geller's level of traffic stress is that it was created in Portland, and really thinking about Portland roads where they do not have streets as stressful as some of our streets. In my experience, they don't have those like 7-lane, 45-mile-an-hour arterials in the urban area. So I think that having something like LTS 5 to acknowledge that there's a place where almost no one will bike and share traffic could be very useful for our region. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree. And that's definitely something I think we can integrate into our eventual process. So thank you for all the comments and suggestions.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a really interesting presentation. Steps or questions. I will move on to item number 6, the SunCloud Data Portal. And this item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Ted Brown, Transportation Planning and Performance Manager.
Thank you, Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the Arizona SunCloud Data Portal. Next slide, please. I'll take you through a very quick what it is, some of our more innovative data layers, and then end with a very quick demonstration of the tool itself. Next slide, please. So what is the SunCloud? The SunCloud is the title of an Accelerated Innovation Deployment Grant that was originally awarded back in 2017. ADOT, MAG, SunCorridor MPO, and a slew of other partners were awarded $1 million to develop a data portal to increase and improve the accessibility, usability, and quality of data and analytical tools for transportation planning. And the overall goal of the project was to better understand the needs of the corridor and help align those with policies and strategic investments. But one side benefit we kept hearing over and over, particularly from our rural partners, was what an enormous help this project was in terms of data, as it provides high quality data sets across the entire study area. Next slide, please. And for our project, the Sun Corridor study area refers to 5 counties in southern Arizona. We have Maricopa, Pinal, Pima, Santa Cruz, and Cochise counties. These counties cover a bit more than 30,000 square miles of land and somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% of the state's population. And we needed many hands to make light work, and so we started a coalition. Next slide, please. A robust team of stakeholders that included all the MPOs and COGs in the region. We had county agencies and, of course, our partners at ADOT and FHWA. Over the next 5 years, Meg led the team that developed and implemented the SunCloud Data Portal. Next slide, please. So I want to touch on some data layers. We have 22 distinct data layers in the final platform, and I obviously can't cover them all, but I will say that we cover all the traditional transportation data sets. We have counts, we have model data, we have asset condition data. However, this being an accelerated innovation deployment grant, we obviously had to do some innovating, and so I want to highlight just 3 data layers here. First up is safety, where we've applied methodology from the Highway Safety Manual to help identify areas where opportunities exist to potentially implement impactful solutions. To do that, we've had to combine crash data from ADOT with travel demand model AADTs and the best available safety performance functions. And the ability to evaluate projects based on something other than crash rate is a step forward, and the ability to evaluate projects based on a predictive methodology is a huge leap forward. Next slide, please. Now, next up is our disadvantaged facility users layer. So before this tool, all of our equity scores were based on proximity. So you're near a community of concern, then you get the points. That's kind of a less than ideal methodology, as it doesn't take into account who's actually using that roadway in question. So instead, we partnered with a company called Replica and essentially had them run an analysis for each segment in the network. And what that means is that for each roughly 1 mile segment, we got a report about the number of users and each user's home location. So from there, we combined that data with our disadvantaged community information, and with those 2 pieces of the puzzle, we're able to calculate a percentage of roadway users who have a home location in a disadvantaged community. This is a monumental step forward in terms of how we can score equity, and I want to give you an example of how this change in methodology can help us do better evaluations in our region. On your screen, you're seeing a little piece of South Extension Road that doesn't tick any of the disadvantaged community boxes. However, you can see all or almost all of the blocks around it do. So in our old analysis, any improvement on that segment of roadway would have received a very low equity score. But using our new analysis method, we can show that about 75% of the people who use that roadway on a daily basis have a home location in a disadvantaged community. Next slide, please. And next up is pavement condition. So Meg went through an exercise where we collected pavement condition data from all 27 cities, 3 native nations, and 2 counties to produce an arterial pavement condition layer. Frankly, it was a lot of work. Our agencies used 7 different pavement condition methodologies. It all has to be crosswalked. It represented different time periods. Nevertheless, we tried to do the same thing for the SunCloud and quickly realized we were kind of playing a different ballgame here. So we turned to Wejo and more directly to their partner Neurodynamics for a third-party solution, and they provided data to solve our problem. The data set that they provided has a lot of advantages, namely that it's uniformly collected data from across the region. Every roadway that is functionally classified as an arterial or above is covered and has received a score. That's particularly useful for those agencies that don't have access to a LiDAR van or a pavement truck. Secondarily, it provides recent data, as all the data that we put in the platform was limited to the last 12 months. I think there's more layers of interest here, particularly broadband data, but we need to move on in the interest of time. Next slide, please. So what can you do with the SunCloud? Well, the platform was designed for maximum flexibility, but also ease of use. So we've tried to incorporate some common useful tools that you've probably seen in other platforms, but we also had some specific goals in mind. So you can easily switch symbolization between commonly used attributes for each layer. By that, I don't mean switching between layers. I mean switching which attribute you're seeing within a layer, and I'll give an example of that in just a minute. You can filter the data by attributes, saying, hey, I only want to see roadways that have more than 50 crashes, or by geography, saying I only want to see the data for my city, county, MPO. And then we wanted to give you the ability to get that data out of the platform. And so you can do that either by printing maps to include in emails or reports, or actually exporting the raw data underlying it so that you can continue your analysis in the software of your choice. Next slide, please. So our motto throughout this project was really different strokes for different folks. And this is the culmination of that. Now, out of the box, we've provided our recommendations for some weights based on nationwide best practices and professional judgment. But we knew that with a dozen agencies involved in creating this tool, and with data covering dozens of additional agencies, there was no way we were going to get a single set of weights that was going to make everyone happy. So instead, we built a widget where you can set your own weights on the fly in your browser and then rescore that entire 5-county area in no time. If bridges aren't important to you, you can set them to 0, rerun it. If you think reliability is more important, you can crank that up, hit rescore, and away you go with a bespoke set of weights tailored to your individual needs. We're very, very proud of that feature and the flexibility that it provides to some of our end users. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of the tool in action. I just want to orient you. It is a very map-focused tool, so that map is always going to be big and right in the center. And then off to the left-hand side of the screen, we're going to see all the different data layers that we have available in the tool. We get the next slide and go ahead and start the video. And so the first thing you're going to see me do here is switch from pavement roughness over to safety. And then I'm going to switch the symbolization from excess expected crashes to bicycle and pedestrian fatal and severe injuries. From there, I'm going to switch over to our filters tab, and I'm going to pick the geography I want to see. I'm going to pick on cities. I'm going to pick on our friends over at Chandler. And when I do click on Chandler, it's going to zoom directly into their extents, and it's going to get rid of all the extraneous information off the map. From here, they could go and print out this map to a PDF for that report or email. They can also access the underlying information, so they can view that in a tabular form, and then they could export this if they so choose, so they could continue their analysis. We can also take it a step further, and we can click on individual segments on the map to see all the underlying attributes there. This being a safety layer, you'll see the number of non-motorized crashes, you'll see the fatal injury rate. There's a wealth of information kind of hidden behind those attributes. The last thing I'm doing here is just changing the map underlying one of those creature comfort items. Next slide, please. So I wanted to leave you with an example of kind of how this could be used in practice. And let's just pretend for a minute that there is a notice of funding opportunity that's coming down the pipe from the federal government, and they're really focused on some quantitative data elements. Knowing that and knowing which elements, you could come over to our scoring tool, and you can see it going through the process here, and you could start moving those sliders to the criteria that's important for this NOFO, and then rescoring that entire network very quickly. You press that rescore button, and in a couple of seconds, a brand new layer will pop up. Once we've done that, you can then see how that reacts to the changes that you've made by turning on and off that new layer that you created. And you can also export that new layer that you created. So here we're seeing changing those sliders. Now we're going to hit rescore. And this is the couple of seconds parts while it scores through and chunks through all that data. And now we're seeing an updated version based on the weights that we have put in. A few additional notes here. We have 2 GIS layers that might be of particular interest to this committee. They're both only on the arterial roadways, but we have a bike lane layer. This layer is a bit unique in that it provides the width of the bike lane and is represented by a polygon. So our bikeways map is a segment, a line. This is actually the shape of the bike lane with a width calculation included therein. The second is a sidewalk layer. Now, both layers were developed using ortho imagery through a third-party company. and they used 6-inch imagery to accomplish that. So it's fairly good precision and accuracy. You know, I wouldn't trust it down to the inch, but you're certainly going to get feed out of this with no problem. Next slide, please. Here are some useful links related to the project that were also in your agenda packet. We have our main site. We have a training video that was done with our agency partners. It's about 75 minutes long, but it goes through every button on that tool, so you can understand exactly what's happening in the background and going on with it. And finally, if you like extra credit, we've posted the entire code repository on a Bitbucket. You could go there, and if you're really tech savvy, you can fork that repository, start changing things, take the pieces you like, get rid of the ones that you don't. Next slide, please. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to address the question that I get asked the most after giving this presentation, and that's, is there a plan to keep the platform up to date? And the short answer is not presently. The longer answer is that most of the data in this platform is going to stay useful and relevant for a couple of years. Something like a bridge condition isn't going to change year over year, or probably change a lot within the next 5 years. However, there are some layers in this platform that do have a shelf life, and so we're continuously looking for opportunities to fund the platform's upkeep, and have recently identified a federal grant opportunity, and we've already submitted an application for that. But now is definitely a great time to be learning about the platform, as we estimate we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 months before we really need to dig in and start refreshing all of these data sets. Chair, that completes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ted, for a really informative presentation. Do any members have questions or comments? Hearing none questions, I plan to streets or local streets.
Sorry, Chair, I might have missed that. I think it was, my video was stuttering a little there.
Okay. All right, no worries. I think that my my internet is unstable. So my question was, is there any plan to maybe extend this analysis to collector streets or to local streets, especially the sidewalk data?
So unfortunately, Ms. Chair, members of the Active Transportation Committee, not currently. Unfortunately, it's a cost issue. That's a very expensive process, which is why we had to limit it to those arterials. However, that's certainly something we'd look into. If we could find a cost-effective way of doing it, maybe there's some key collectors or distributors that would make sense to include in a future analysis. I think we'd certainly be open to that.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, my internet is glitching. But thank you for the response. Are there any other questions? I believe I saw Chair Conklin or Member Conklin's hand raised.
Thank you. Great presentation. You may have said this, and I was reading and listening, and I don't do that well. Is the data something that an agency could have access to, especially related to the sidewalk? Because we've been trying to build a sidewalk polygon layer for a pretty long time, just to have a better idea of the true width of things, including paths, now that I think the League of American Bicyclists asked for more detailed path width information in applications. So I just wasn't sure if that's something that agencies can have access to.
Chair Brown, members of the Active Transportation Committee, absolutely. If you're feeling brave and tech savvy, you can go to that SunCloud website, and there's these little eyes next to each layer, and that takes you to where that data lives online. The entire platform is publicly available. But if you prefer, I'm also happy to send that information to you directly as a geodatabase or any other file type that you'd like.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions or comments? All right, hearing none, thank you again, Ted, for this information, and to Mag for making all of this great information. Are there any requests from the membership for an item on a future agenda? All right, hearing none, the next agenda item is comments from the committee. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? And I am actually going to go first and say, I just want to congratulate Member Ratledge and the Coalition of Arizona Bicyclists for an absolutely amazing bicycle summit. You guys did a great job as always, and it was really an incredibly useful and inspiring event. So thank you so much.
I'll just say thank you. And if anybody has any thoughts about this that was at the conference, has thoughts about it, there is a survey you can complete. And if you have thoughts about what you'd like to see next year, think about them and let me know.
All right, thank you so much. And now I will reopen the floor. Do any members have any announcements or comments or items to share? Chair or Member Mariel.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind people that there'll be for the Active Transportation Safety Action Plan that's being done in conjunction with the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. There's a virtual stakeholder meeting on May the 14th from 1 to 3. I'll put this in the chat. And there's a registration link for that to get the link for the meeting. I want to thank Kay for rescheduling this meeting so that people could attend the in-person stakeholder meeting on the 16th of April. That was very much appreciated. And then there'll be a public involvement meeting at the Gateway Community Campus on the 30th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And hopefully if the meeting still goes, I can get all this stuff in the chat. But thank you very much. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Mariel. And Member Conclude.
Thank you. Happy Bike Month to everyone who happens to be celebrating. We had a very fun-filled Cycle the Arts on this past Sunday. I think we had about 70 people join us to do a small group bike tours of public art around Old Town and the Arizona Canal and Indian Bend Wash path. Didn't know it would be the same day we would hit 100, so I'm glad we started an hour early this year so that all the groups were done by 10:30. But we do offer a self-guided option starting in early May for anybody that would want to check that map out online. You just go to the city's website and search Bike Month or reach out to me. And then tomorrow we're actually doing our Bike to Work Day in Scottsdale for people who maybe wanted to do multiple cities. We couldn't join everybody last Wednesday. So we'll be out there tomorrow morning, and that web information is the same place to find where the bike stops will be. And it doesn't matter if you're biking to work. We're just happy that you're riding your bike and we want to celebrate with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or items from the members? Okay, hearing none, then next meeting of May 21st, 2024 is adjourned, and I encourage you to enjoy the rest of Bike Month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.